Welcome to Rico 12. I'm Justin, your host and a beautifully imperfect, stumbling, bumbling child of an absolutely powerful and perfectly loving God and an addict. Rico 12 is all about exploring the common threads of addiction and sharing tools and hope from those on a similar path. We gather from diverse backgrounds, faiths, and places to learn and support one another. Our speakers represent various fellowships, addictions, and afflictions, thus showing the common threads of recovery no matter our addiction or affliction. Today's speaker for the 280th meeting is Sharon E, a first-time Rico 12 speaker. Her chosen topic today is dealing with our addictions in the order in which they are killing us, and I look forward to hearing her message here in just a few minutes, but first for a little bit of business. Rico 12 has several recovery resources in our family of podcasts and social media communities. To learn more, listen more, connect more, just hang out and learn and grow with us, you can check out the other podcasts that you can find at rico12.com. That's RECO12.com. To join our social communities and check out you can check out the chat and the show notes. We also send out a couple of weekly emails just letting you know about the week's meeting and everything about the speaker. So jump in on that and join us. Rico 12 is self-supporting, and your contributions help us continue our mission. A specific thank you this week goes to Cheryl for her generous repeat donations over the last year. Thank you so much, Cheryl. And thanks to all of our spearheads, past, present, and future. Your donations really help in this project. If you out there also feel the desire to become a spearhead and support this cause, visit rico12.com/support or click on the links that I've put in the show notes, and I will put in the show notes in the chat for one-time or monthly donation options. Your support, not just financially, but with your word of mouth, makes a difference in keeping us able to share these messages of recovery. We look forward each meeting to receiving from the light reflected from our speakers. That light inspires hope, meaning, worth, and growth in us, the listening audience. Now I'm going to introduce our guest speaker for today, Sharon E, and give just a little background on her. Sharon started her recovery journey on October 21st, 1985, when she was released from the bondage of alcohol. Since then, she has uncovered and discovered other addictions and afflictions that she has experienced relief from. She is a grateful member of several 12-step programs, including AA, FA, SLAA, Alanon, S-Anon, and Adult Children of Alcoholics. Sharon is grateful to be the third generation of recovery in her family. Excited to hear from you, Sharon. Take it away. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Justin B. It's great to be here, and welcome to all of you who are listening. I'm Sharon. I'm a grateful recovering addict of many types, and I am here armed with the facts about myself. And God willing, I'll have 39 years of sobriety next month. And as you said, I'm third generation in recovery. My grandfather, the hand of AA, found him in 1957 in northern Manitoba, Canada. And he was in a small mining town of about 1,500, 2,000 people. And he got down on his knees one night and prayed for help with his addiction to alcohol. And he recalled, the thought came to his mind that there was an ad in the paper with Alcoholics Anonymous with a phone number, and he called that number. And he was able to stay sober for 39 years before he passed. He went from being the town drunk to being the first mayor of his town. And my mom just passed this past January with 44 years of sobriety. So I'm grateful to follow in their path. And so what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. Even at this stage in my recovery, I'm still reading the big book, going through it once again. And I love what it says, about Bill W. on page 8. No words can tell of the loneliness and despair I found in that bitter morass of self-pity. And that's exactly what it felt like. I grew up, obviously, in an alcoholic family, and at age 13 was when I felt like I picked up all my addictions at once. I was upset about a boy in school that I was interested in, and came home from school that day, and I got into my parents' liquor cabinet, got out some cake and ice cream, and I proceeded to drink and eat myself into oblivion. And that from the start, I was a blackout drinker. So, my disease progressed through my teens. And my first thought at 18 was that, maybe I'll go to an all women's college and that will help me to escape these addictions and afflictions. But of course, as we all know, the geographical cure does not work. And I was just introduced to more drugs and my eating disorder, my alcoholism just continued to progress. And I'd already totaled my parents' car from drinking and driving, but my disease was, I think it was the progression of the eating disorder along with the alcohol that made me hit bottom so at such a young age. And like any good addict, my career choice was to be around my addictions. So I was in the hospitality industry, pursuing a degree in hotel restaurant management because I wanted to own my own bar and restaurant someday. And but after my first year of college, I realized that wasn't working for me, being at this all women's college outside of Boston. So I decided to do another geographical cure. Left there, went to a small rural college in upstate New York and co-ed, and thinking, this is what I need. I need to be out in the country and away from the big city. But again, my disease followed me. And thankfully, my higher power, well, actually, I'll go back a little bit. When I was 19, I decided, I needed help with my eating disorder. So I sought out a therapist who specialized in eating disorders. And after 4 sessions with him, he told me I was an alcoholic. And if I wanted to deal with my eating disorder, I needed to get sober first. And my first thought was, what? I'm not here for this, But he told me all about AA, and I started going to meetings. And so I was going to meetings, still drinking, going to meetings, and one or the other had to go. So of course meetings went. And I continued to drink, and I would tell him, here I was, a 20-year-old young woman, and I was comparing at the meetings. I wasn't identifying. And my thought was, these are a bunch of middle-aged men going through divorces. That was my comparison. And my therapist said, Sharon, I guarantee you that things will get worse if you don't stop drinking. And I thought to myself, guarantee? You can't guarantee me anything. And within a few weeks, my higher power showed up in a police uniform, and I was arrested for drinking and driving. And so my first thought was, wow, he was right. Things are getting worse. Now I have legal issues, financial issues. And, and that to me was humiliating, to be, rolling my fingers in ink and rolling my fingers on, getting my fingerprints, getting my picture taken with numbers. That was my bottom, but I wasn't quite ready to stop yet. And then my therapist said, and that was the other thing that I identified with in Bill's story about how, he hit a bottom, but he still had 2 more years. He still endured 2 more years of agony. Thankfully, mine didn't go on for 2 more years. The remorse, horror, hopelessness of the next morning are unforgettable. And, but, I went back to my therapist and told him what had happened. He opened his door and he essentially said, here's the door. He said, if you don't want to stop drinking, there's no sense in you being in therapy. And I couldn't believe that he was doing that to me at the time, but it was the best thing he could have done, because then I was left to myself. And, within a few weeks, I called him up and I told him I was ready for treatment. And little did I know when I found him as my therapist, that he was the chief of psychology at the local drug and alcohol rehab near my home. So that was my higher power watching out for me. So I, got sober. But again, I was going into treatment. I was still very active in my eating disorder, binging and purging up to 10 times a day. Because like I said, I was around food all the time with my job. And so got out of rehab, was going to, luckily I had the luxury of, as a college student, I could go to 2 meetings a day. I probably went to 2 meetings a day for the first 2 years of my sobriety. And my first sponsor that I picked she was a lieutenant commander in the Navy. And she really taught me the disciplines of the program. I used to hate the word discipline because I associated it with punishment. But I came to realize that discipline is really very spiritual. Getting on my knees every morning and asking my higher power to keep me abstinent and sober, and thanking my higher power at the end of the day, and doing my readings. Anyway, 6 months into sobriety, my sponsor, who was a double winner in AA and OA, she said, "You can't keep doing that to yourself," meaning the binging and purging, "and stay sober." And she was right. I didn't get sober to feel bad about myself. So she told me to go to OA. And off I went to another treatment place for my eating disorder. And, I was in OA for 27 years before I transitioned more into the FA program about 10 years ago. And I just felt like I needed more structure, more discipline to my recovery with food. But, a year into my sobriety, I was coming up on a year, September, the month before my 1-year anniversary. I, was feeling anxious about getting my 1 year, and, how do I celebrate that? Do I drink? Like, what? How do you celebrate a year of sobriety? It felt like a big deal to me. And I got a call from, my family is all Canadian. I got a call from the Royal Canadian Mounted Police that they had found my uncle dead in his apartment. And he'd been there for a few days from drinking. And at that moment, I felt like that was his gift to me. His gift to me was to show me that this is a deadly disease. And, he had 9 years of sobriety at one point in his recovery, and then he went back out and died within 6 years at the age of 48. So, at that point, I realized, I wanted to dedicate myself more to helping others in this program. I didn't want to see that happen to other people. And, at this point now, I'm sober, coming up on a year. I'm abstinent with my food. And now all the feelings are coming up. And I'm like, what am I supposed to do with this anger, this grief, this sadness, this feelings of abandonment, whatever it is? So that sent me to ACoA program to learn how to deal with my feelings, and also Alanon. So, and I was told early on, like my topic, we deal with our addictions in the order in which they're killing us. I had to put down the drink first before I could address my eating disorder. And then I had to, go to ACoA to learn how to deal with my feelings. And then, 5 years into sobriety, I felt like I was ready to get into, commit myself to a relationship and met my husband to be in the program. I thought we had what it took to have a long, loving, healthy relationship. Got married, had a couple of children. 19 years into his sobriety, he relapsed. And that was a devastating blow. And, sent me back to Alanon again. And, but I knew I had to stay the course. Sharon, just stay the course, regardless of what's happening, marriage, divorce, children, death, whatever, just stay the course. And, he had explained to me what happened to him the night that he picked up. He was at a restaurant in New York City and on business. The thought occurred to him, oh, well, I'll have a glass of wine. I never used to drink wine. Drinks 1, 2, 3, 4, leaves the restaurant, off to a bar, more, we all know what that's like, the disease of more. Goes back to his hotel room, lays down on the bed, and instead of thinking, oh, I miss my wife, I miss my kids, the room is spinning, and he's like, this is what I've been missing. And when I heard that, I was like, oh my gosh, this disease has got him. And I knew there was nothing I could do about it. This disease is like a locomotive. You cannot stop it. In the big book, it talks about being like a tornado. And if I get caught up in that tornado, touch that tornado, I'm going to get sucked right into that. And I just knew that I had to make my sobriety, myself a priority, my kids a priority. And, that relationship ended probably 12 years ago. But, from that, I've learned a lot. Learned a lot about, going to, SLAA meetings and S-Anon meetings to help me to deal with that addiction too. And there's so many, I love the literature in all of these programs. And I was reading this is a good one from the Alanon Courage to Change, August 31st. It's one of the daily meditation books. I have often tried to change other people to suit my own desires. I knew what I needed, and if those needs weren't met, the problem was with the other person. I was looking for someone who would always be there for me, but would not impose on me very much. Looking back, it's almost as if I was looking for a pet rather than a human being. Naturally, this outlook put a strain on my relationships. When I read that line, it's almost as if I was looking for a pet rather than a human being. I was like, oh my gosh, is that what I've been doing? And then it goes on to say, trying to change other people is futile, foolish, and certainly not loving. Today, instead of assuming that they are the problem, I can look at myself to see what needs changing within. And that's what I'm, always trying to do is look within. There's another reading from, I'm not in the MA program, Marijuana Anonymous, but one of my friends is. And I love what it said in the MA Big Book. We were fatalistic. We accepted other people's constraints on our needs, desires, and ambitions. We believed that our lot in life was inevitable, inescapable, and miserable. Finally, we reached the point where our disease enslaved us. Our needs were unfulfilled, our passions frustrated, and our ambitions thwarted because we could see no other way to live. The sad fact was that we cruelly and piteously oppressed ourselves and usually found other people who were more than willing to help us do so. And that was a scary thought, that I seek out other people who help me to think that way about myself. And that's my ACoA stuff, that out of my fear of abandonment, that I choose people who are emotionally unavailable. I used to point fingers at, oh, well, he's emotionally unavailable. He's emotionally unavailable. Well, okay, but I'm choosing these people, and I had to look at that, my fear of abandonment, the whole like distancer pursuer relationship dynamic. As long as I'm a pursuer, I never have to be emotionally intimate with someone. If I'm chasing a distancer, and the distancer never has to be abandoned because they're always being pursued after. And looking at my, social emotional anorexia, that's where that stems from is, if I'm in a pursuit mode, then I'm being anorexic. Other things I'm looking at the big book and that I love are that I have a new employer with a capital E. I love that. I love how they capitalize so many of the words in the big book, which are pointing me in the direction of my higher power. also says, we found the great reality, capital G, capital R, deep down within us. In the last analysis, it is only there that he may be found, page 55. Another thing that was pointed out to me by one of your speakers that you have on frequently was page 62, that selfishness and self-centeredness is the root of my troubles. I'm driven by 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, and self-pity, that I make decisions based on self, which later put me in a position to be hurt, that I have to be rid of this selfishness or it kills me. And there's no way of ridding it except with the help of my higher power. And even, that's page 62, but it says it throughout the book, page 14. A price had to be paid. It meant destruction of self-centeredness. Just becoming more and more aware of how I am selfish and self-centered. And, working with others helps me with that. I just took 2 women through the 12 steps this past summer. I'm halfway through the steps with another fellow, and I have another sponsee that I need to take her through the steps as well. Another page I love in the big book is page 124, that my painful past may be of infinite value to others. Showing others who suffer how I was given help is the very thing which makes life seem so worthwhile to me now. Cling to the thought that in God's hands, the dark past is the greatest possession that I have. It's the key to life and happiness for others. With it, I can avert death and misery for them. And I remember hearing a woman in the meetings not too long ago that, our mess becomes our message of hope. And a little bit more about my story. So my kids now are 22 and 25. When I was 20 and a half years old is when I went away for a month for my alcoholism. My daughter, at the same exact age, my oldest, at 20 and a half years old, she also went away for a month. But the difference is she went away for yoga teacher training. And, that's to me like, as we talked in the beginning, the lineage, the passing the torch from one generation to the next, this disease is cunning, baffling, and powerful, but our recovery is powerful. It has a ripple effect on the people around us. And, I'm so grateful that, my kids don't really have, they know where they came from. In fact, when I first had them and I brought them to the doctor when they were babies, infants, the doctor said because they were born from 2 addicts, 2 alcoholics, that they had an 80% chance of being an alcoholic. Those aren't good odds. But they, one of my therapists refers to them as recovery babies because they grew up in the program. I brought them to meetings since they were newborns. And, they would enjoy coming to see me speak at meetings or come to meetings with me. And I'm so grateful for that. And my oldest daughter, even though she's not a drinker, she said that she feels like she has the disease. She can feel it in her. And that is so powerful, that I think my guess is that she probably identifies with the disease of more, that she has that disease of more. And it can be more of anything. And that's why I have to be constantly vigilant of, doing my 10-step inventory. Where am I being unselfish, unkind, unloving? And how can I do differently? How can I do better? I'm certainly not perfect. I continue to make mistakes, and, but I know that I'm on a path, and I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful that I have this design for living. So many people don't have that. And, if people are open to hearing about it, then I'm open to sharing it with them. So I think that probably wraps it up for me. And I'll send it back to you, Justin. Thank you again for having me.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Sharon. I loved your story. I loved your experience, strength, and hope. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. I've written a couple of questions, but a reminder before I get to those, anyone in the live audience, if you have a question for Sharon, please type that in the chat. I will get to those as we move along. If you want to remain anonymous and don't want your first name read as I read your question, you can direct message it to me, or in the note, just say anonymous, please, and we'll get to those. Sharon, I would like to start off with this multi-generational thing. Your grandfather, your mother, both long in recovery, and you picked up drinking. Did you pick up drinking before your mom got into recovery? How did that work out? And then how was her communication to you as she was in recovery?
Yeah, thank you, Justin. She was considered a periodic binge drinker, so she could go long periods of time without drinking, like even years. So I didn't recall her drinking when I was young. She stopped drinking when I was 6. I don't recall her drinking prior to that. It was usually done if she was at a gathering where kids were not allowed. And so from 6 to 12, she didn't drink. And then she relapsed from when I was age 12 to 14. And during that time, I only recall seeing her under the influence one time. But obviously, the ism was there in the family. And so I guess I picked up, I'm on some level, I must have known something because that's when I picked up. I had that. She actually left the family for maybe a month or two, but and that really triggered some abandonment for me. So that's when I picked up my diseases, my addictions. And then, so she got sober when I was 14. And then, but I think she really dug her heels into the program when she saw me hitting bottom and going to treatment, because then my whole family had to be involved in my treatment because I was still young.
Oh, very good. And did your grandfather talk much about his recovery in your interactions with him, or was that before your day? Or tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, at 16 years old, when I totaled one of my parents' cars, he did say something to me, but I didn't really understand what he was talking about. And he said that I could come to him and talk to him anytime I wanted to. And of course, he lived in Manitoba, Canada, and I lived in New York State. So I didn't see him that frequently at that time. But when when I got into recovery, we had lots of conversations, and I would go visit him and he would come and visit us. And I actually had the honor and pleasure of being able to speak at a meeting that was the 3 generations of us. The 3 of us spoke at a meeting together, and that was really powerful. So it's my grandfather, my mom, and myself. And a
That
shout
that
out
would
to my brothers who are also in recovery.
that's such a beautiful thing, a beautiful opportunity for you to be able to do a 3 generation speaker meeting, and grateful that this family disease seems to be the ripple effect of recovery seems to be happening, and that's such a cool miracle. Thank you for sharing that. Question from Cheryl from our live audience. Cheryl says, "Thank you for your story, Sharon. How have you experienced the recovery that the big book describes of being, quote, restored to sanity, where these cravings have disappeared, whether it be alcoholic cravings, food cravings, or codependent cravings, and you're no longer white knuckling in abstinence?"
Wow, that's a powerful question. Um, so yeah, like I said, um, I still have to get on my knees every day. I do my readings every day. I actually have a sponsor right now in the FA program, and I call her every morning. Here I am, 38 plus years of sobriety, and I'm talking to a sponsor every day for 15 minutes. In the FA program is such a powerful program because I'm surrendering on a level that, I've never surrendered before. Turning my food, writing my food down every day, weighing and measuring it, turning it over to my sponsor, turning what I eat over and how much I weigh over to my higher power, or to my sponsors, not my higher power, but in human form. That is such a level of surrender that I've never experienced before. And, as part of that program, I make 3 phone calls a day. I read the big book 2 pages a night. I'm working my program, and I continue to surrender my thoughts, surrender my will. And, I just continue to remain open and willing.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Sharon. And we have another question from Anne from our live audience, and it goes hand in hand with a question I have for you. And says, have you gone through the 12 steps separately with each recovery program you've been involved in? And what I would like to ask with that is, well, actually, let's just hit that, and then I'll follow up with another follow up. Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, I have been through the 12 steps, I don't know, dozens of times at this point. And it's interesting. So I first did my 12 steps through AA with my AA sponsor. And then when I came into OA, I did them again. And then I realized that I was having an issue in relationships. So before I even came into the SLAA program, I did a fourth and fifth step inventory specifically on relationships. So sometimes maybe I won't go through all of them, but I'll do a specific behavior or addiction. I'll do like a fourth and fifth step inventory. But yes, I have done, well, in ACoA, I can't say that I've done the 12 steps, but in all the other programs, yes, I have gone through the 12 steps. And, but this spring, I was kind of more introduced to the spiritual gangster group, and I really like how they kind of incorporate it all together and use the big book. So that's what I'm doing now with my sponsees, is taking them through the sponsorship workbook, because it applies to all of our addictions.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that and powerful things there. On that note of the different fellowships, going through and doing the steps in each of the fellowships previously, was there a difference in your experience between the self-reflection, the self-examination necessary in like AA or SLAA or whatever, and that mirror being turned around in the Anon programs? Is there a difference there that you found, and what does that look like to you?
A difference between my addiction and the Anon addiction.
Yeah, and the recovery from it, doing the steps in that. Yes.
Yeah, that's something I'm still, exploring. Like I said, in the Courage to Change reading that I read, when I'm focused on someone else, then I'm not taking a look at myself, and I'm not taking my own inventory. When I'm taking other people's inventory, that's how my Anon shows up, is when I'm taking other people's inventory, or trying to, instead of focusing on me, I'm focusing on someone else. And with the different, working the steps with the different programs, like I've harmed people in different ways with my addiction, with my different addictions. I've harmed people differently with, my food, with my SLAA stuff, with my alcoholism, with my Anon things. And, more continues to be revealed.
Yeah, and as more is revealed, do you take that? So sometimes when more is revealed to me, I'm like, oh, come on. I just went through all this stuff to move through all these other things, and now there's more to deal with. And other times I'm like, oh, thank you for showing me something else. What is your current attitude when more is revealed?
Yeah, sometimes I'm not, because sometimes my it's revealed to me by a sponsor, and I'm not always welcome to that. Initially, even if I get miffed at first when it's being shown to me, I'm still taking it in, and I still think about it, and then I'll come back and I'll be grateful for it. I try to seek out people who are going to confront me on my stuff. I don't want to be stuck anymore. I don't want to be going to the gates of insanity or death. And so I need people who are going to confront me. In fact, like I said earlier, I a few months ago, I reached out to one of your regular speakers, and I felt like she kind of gave me a tongue lashing, but I needed it. I specifically sought her out because I knew that she would confront me on my stuff. And I'm grateful for that.
No, that's a good attitude to have. I think it's a hard attitude to take. Oh yeah, I'll be grateful for a tongue lashing I receive. Do you maintain one primary sponsor, or do you have sponsors in each of the different fellowships you're in? How does that look in your own recovery?
So yeah, I'd have had different sponsors and different programs. Yeah, currently I would say I have a couple of different sponsors. And, when I was first in AA, I was trying to deal with my food addiction in AA. And I would kind of talk about it in meetings, like that I was concerned about my eating. And people would say things, oh, what's the big deal? I eat a half a gallon of ice cream every night. And my thought was, I can't do that. And so I realized, I can't go to AA to get my OA needs met. So that's why I knew I had to transition to another program. And so same thing with sponsors, and I'm grateful that some of my sponsors will openly admit, I don't have any experience in that. You're going to have to go to someone else for that. Oh, so yeah, I do seek out sponsors in different fellowships.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. It is good to get different angles at times. All right,
Oh,
we have
and
another.
I have a story to share about that
Yeah,
too.
please, please.
Yeah. So, we, as a person in long-term recovery, I've hit several bottoms throughout my recovery, even in recovery, emotional bottoms, or addiction bottoms. So a few years ago, I was, not in a good place. And I got down on my knees one night and I just prayed to my higher power, God, please show me a clear sign as to what to do with my life. And, the next day I got a phone call, came through, and it said it was from Lynn from Idaho. And I was like, I haven't heard from her in like 3 years. Why is she calling me? So I let it go to voicemail, said, I'll call her back later. I gave her a call back later. And she said, oh, I'm sorry. I was actually trying to call my sponsor. My sponsor's name is Sharon. And I said, okay, that's interesting. And I said, well, how's everything in Idaho? And she said, oh, I don't live in Idaho anymore. I live in Massachusetts. I said, well, where in Massachusetts do you live? And she said, I live in Sharon, Massachusetts. Do you know where Sharon, Massachusetts is? And I said, I know where Sharon, Massachusetts is. My parents were married in Sharon, Massachusetts. I was named after Sharon, Massachusetts. And she said, oh, and I also live on Sharon Street. And I was the both of us were kind of blown away. And I asked her to be my sponsor. At the time, I didn't have a sponsor. And it was like, my higher power literally sent me a sign with my name written all over it. And it was just, it felt so higher power. We both kind of were like, wow, that's divine intervention.
Wow, that's really cool, and I love these coincidences. I put in quotation marks here that seem to come around at the times we need them. Thank you for sharing that. I have another question from our live audience. This is from Monty. Monty says, "Thank you so much for sharing. How long did it take you to work your first formal working of the steps?"
So yeah, my first formal working of the steps, I probably was around, I guess I was 21 years old. So I didn't have a lot of history behind me at that age, thankfully. And I remember doing my fourth step, writing my fourth step in one day. I, it was a Sunday and my sponsor told me, you need to do your fourth step. So I just sat down and I just wrote everything out, pages. And then thankfully she was available that evening that I was able to do my fifth step with her. So probably, within a few weeks for that time around. Other times that I've worked the steps, I've done it with a group of people. like an AWOL group, a way of life group. And so we would do like a step a week. And so that would be over the course of obviously like 12 weeks or more if we had to go beyond that. And then more recently in the springtime, I went through the steps again through the sponsorship guidebook. And I think I did that within 2 weeks with my sponsor, but I met with her every day for an hour every day. And now I've walked some of my sponsees through the 12 steps using that format. I had one sponsee, I think we met once a week for an hour and we got through it in like 2 months.
Yeah.
So
So there's,
various times.
yeah, various times. And yeah, thanks for diving deep into that. And yeah, I've seen it in different lengths in my own recovery too. All right. Oh, Tash from New Zealand says, what is the sponsorship work guidebook you mentioned? If you want to say that, and I'll definitely put a link to this in the show notes of the podcast, and I'll grab a link and put it in the chat here too. But go ahead and talk about that for a second, Sharon.
Yeah, so I learned about that through the Spiritual Gangster group, which one of my sponsors had guided me to through the WhatsApp. And so once a month, they have they do the 12 steps in 4 hours. That's the last Sunday of the month. And, Justin, if you're going to put that in there. So I attended that, and that's where I learned about the spiritual or the sponsorship guide workbook. I have used a similar guide workbook before in another group where we actually did the 12 steps in a weekend. And so I was kind of familiar with that, that kind of a format. And I really like it because in that one, even though I'm not writing paragraph after paragraph after paragraph for a fourth step, I'm kind of using just more words. It still felt very thorough to me. Maybe even more thorough than some of my other previous 4 steps.
Yeah, thanks, Sharon. And I just put the link there in the chat. I will make sure it's in the show notes also. And at that link, you can get the workbook. You can register for the workshop that's coming up here in about a week and a half. And it's good. I would highly recommend checking it out. And if you feel prompted to, going through the steps in that manner. All right. So, Sharon, tell me a little bit more about, you talked about you went into rehab for alcoholism as a young woman. You mentioned that I think you went into like a facility for food addiction for your food issues. Talk about the importance of a hospitalization period, whether it be in a formal setting or what would that look like in somebody going into a 12-step program? What does that hospitalization period, what can it look like?
So yeah, I mean, this was back in the mid 80s, and I think insurance was much more willing to pay for treatment back then. I think they're a little more strict on that now, but I just at that age, I'm so grateful that I was able to do that because I couldn't stop on my own. At 20 years old and a college student, it still blows me away that I was even able to return to the college where I was drinking. Thankfully, I realized after a month of living on campus and going to my classes that I couldn't keep doing that. I was like, what am I doing here? So it was close enough to home that I was able to commute the 45-minute commute. So I didn't stay on campus because it just wasn't, I had to avoid people, places, and things. But yeah, I needed that. To me, I just needed that immersion into recovery. And I still feel like that I need to flood my mind with recovery the way I used to flood my body with alcohol. And I'll even put myself on like a retreat weekend where like maybe I'll go to like 5 meetings over the course of a weekend or more. And I still do a lot of retreats too. I just went to a 12-step retreat a few weeks ago. And, I need those constant refresher courses, those refresher reminders. It was really helpful for me to be immersed into a setting where I was, monitored and they would call it pull-ups, when they would pull you up on your behavior, confront you on your behavior. And, so I did that for 4 weeks for my drinking. And then 9 months later, went into treatment for 6 weeks for the eating disorder. And someone's asking a question about ACA and ACoA. Do you want me to go ahead and answer that one, Justin?
Yeah, go ahead and answer that one.
Okay. So ACA is, there are two different programs, actually. Alanon is ACoA. So Alanon has their version of ACoA. They actually have their own literature specifically for ACoAs. ACA, which actually stands for ACoA, is a completely different 12-step program. They have what they call the Big Red Book. They have different literature. I'm not sure, nowadays I think Alanon doesn't even differentiate between ACoA. I think that they just have Alanon meetings with an ACoA focus that you can find, but they are two separate programs.
And it stands for Adult Children of Alcoholics, correct?
Yes, correct. Yes.
Yeah. All right. Very good. All right. So Sharon, before we start wrapping up here, do you have any final words of wisdom that you'd like to make sure you leave us with?
Well, I see another question there about S-Anon.
Yep, another question just came in. Let me read that to you here.
Yeah,
Did you go to S-Anon long-term or for a short stint while learning and surrendering those areas?
So I've been at S-Anon on a couple of different occasions. Once was in my marriage, and now more recently in another relationship. So what was the question about that?
Did you go long-term or was it more short stint to?
And surrendering regarding those areas. So yeah, again, I have to, I can't control another person's behavior, and that is so hard. So hard. But I'm so grateful, again, that program takes my recovery to a whole nother level, is accepting that, other people are not where I'm at in my recovery. And that can be hard to do sometimes, but that's, when I'm trying to change another person, that's what takes me to the gates of insanity or death, because that is so crazy making. I cannot stop another person from lying. I cannot stop another person from using whatever addiction they choose to use. All I can do is just take care of myself, set boundaries, work my programs of recovery, and, accept that this is who they are, and I can either choose to be with that person or choose not to be with that person. I love, in the Alanon, again, more literature. The Alanon, there's a pamphlet called A Guide for the Family of the Alcoholic. And in that pamphlet, it talks about the alcoholic's weapons. The first weapon is the ability to arouse anger or provoke loss of temper. The second weapon of the alcoholic is the ability to arouse anxiety. And, that certainly can happen for me, that I can lose my temper. I can get anxious all over someone else's behavior. I remember hearing a speaker years ago from an AA cassette tape. This is how long ago it was. And he said, I'm as much in control, passed out face down on the floor as you are standing over me, because I have you standing over me. And I was like, oh my gosh, yeah, they're just as much in control, passed out face down on the floor. That's where the only thing I have control over it. And I've had to learn to detach with love. I love some of the Alanon literature or S-Anon. PAUSE stands for postpone action until serenity enters. And some other nuggets from Alanon or the Anon programs are stop going to the hardware store looking for milk. I can't tell you how many times I've done that. Don't blame a clown for being a clown. Ask yourself why you keep attending the circus. And, things like that I have to just constantly remind myself, am I going to the hardware store looking for milk? They talk about in Alanon, like, not accepting unacceptable behavior. The issue I have with that is that I have to accept unacceptable behavior. I'm not saying that I'm accepting their behavior, but I have to accept that their behavior is unacceptable, because that's where get tripped up sometimes, where my ACoA wants to keep working it. Like, oh, if I just say it this way, or if I just do it that way, then they'll get it. All these mental gymnastics that I will do to try to get someone to see things the way I want them to see it. And that's why I loved that reading from the Courage to Change that I read earlier. Was like, am I treating this person like a pet or a human being? Like, I can't get them to do tricks, But it's confronting me on my stuff and how I'm looking at things, which I just love that. I love the programs. I love, recovery. I love the way that someone had once said, referred to programs as being brainwashing. Well, I need my brain to be washed because my best thinking got me arrested, got me, binging and purging, and that wasn't working for me.
Yeah, me neither. And I love that. My brain needs a good washing. Yes, it does. Yes, it does. All right, so we had a couple of requests for people privately. If they would like to get in contact with you, Sharon, are you okay if they send me an email and I can connect you with them through those back channels? Is that something you're comfortable with?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so if anybody wants to get in contact with Sharon, you can email me. I just put my email in the chat there. It's rico12pod@gmail.com, and I can just request to get contacted or connected with Sharon. I can make that happen. That way we don't have her information out here on the air. All right, before we wrap up here, any final words of wisdom for us, Sharon?
No, I don't think so. I'm so grateful to be here, and I'm grateful that you asked me to come in and speak on your meeting.
And thank you so much for sharing with us, Sharon. It was a great Rico 12 weekly speaker meeting. If any of you still have questions or would like to connect more, please consider emailing me at rico12pod@gmail.com. You can also jump in our WhatsApp community. I can get you connected if you request that, and you can ask questions there, and we as a community can address that. If you haven't done so already, please consider rating and reviewing the podcast on Apple Podcasts. It's a powerful way of working Step 12. Next Friday, I'm excited to hear from Scott S., another first-time Rico 12 speaker. Scott has been sober in AA for nearly 40 years, and he'll speak to us on his experience as an unlicensed pharmacist turned coach. I look forward to hearing his experience, strength, and hope. Now, stay tuned. You can stay tuned in WhatsApp community. I also send out a couple of emails each week. If you want to get on the email list, you can do that. rico12pod@gmail.com. I'll get you included there. Now, let's launch off into the rest of our day with a favorite recovery prayer of Sharon's that she'll say for us.
All right, there's so many great ones to choose from. This is the alternate first step prayer. My Creator, today I ask for help with my addictions. Denial has kept me from seeing how powerless I am and how my life is unmanageable. I need to learn and remember that I have an incurable illness and that abstinence is the only way to deal with it. And I've added, please teach me to tolerate reality so that I don't need to escape into fantasy. And that comes from, Big Book, page 62. That I'm driven by 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, and self-pity. And I want to be relieved of that delusion and self-pity, self-seeking, selfishness.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Sharon. Everybody remember, there is one who has all power. That one is God. May you find God now. Keep coming back. Let's trudge this road of happy destiny together. Work it. You are worth it.
seen stars fall from above. I've fallen in and out of love. I've been high and I've been low. Now I know I just can't do this on my own. I've seen a boy become a man. He got lost without a plan. He's so far away from home. Now I know that I just can't do this on my own. Your arms surrounding me. Your touch is grounding me. No longer searching for purpose all alone. 'Cause now I know that I just can't do this on my own. I'm looking for the words to say. You make the world a better place, and I can call that place my home. 'Cause now I know that I just can't do this on my own. Your arms surrounding me. Your touch is grounding me. No longer searching for purpose all alone. 'Cause now I know that I just can't do this on my own. So let me see just what you need to set you free, so we can be. I saw stars fall from above. I fell in and out of love. I got high and I fell low. But now I know that I just can't do this on my own. No, I just can't do this on my own. I just can't do this on my own.